And I'm Len Wright with AppClover.com, and today I have some special guests with me, and we're going to kick it off today with I've got my partner Matthew Lutz, who is a co-founder and CEO of AppClover.com. I've also got Jeff Williams from Weblance.com, Jeff, and we've got Carter Thomas as well from Blue Cloud Solutions, and our first weekly Appcast. And so what I want to do is just maybe do a quick introduction for each one of you, for Carter and for Jeff, but maybe I can actually just let you guys do a little introduction for yourselves and tell us just a little bit about what you're doing and who you are, and then we can come back and get the Appcast started off. So Carter, if you want to start things off.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the intro, Len. Basically, I started a website, Blue Cloud Solutions. Started developing apps last October. I was an internet marketer before that. And what I started to do is develop these apps and use them as a way to aggregate data and case studies so that I go back and publish to the web community and the app community and really try to pull back the curtain on the app world and to find out the best ways to market their app, monetize their app, and do it in a really creative way. So it's kind of out-of-the-box stuff, and you're going to hear a lot of things that you probably won't hear on app marketing websites and other places, and try to give you a lot of creativity and brand new ideas that actually work because of things I've done. So
awesome. Well, and we're looking forward to hearing a lot of those insider tips during this podcast. We're going to have a Q&A with Carter to open things up in a few minutes, but just before we get to that, Jeff, I want to introduce you to as well from Weblance.com. And so tell us a little bit about what Weblance is up to and what you're doing there.
Well, Weblance, I think I'm the only one out of all of us that doesn't have their site live yet. So we hope to go live about 2 months ago. So hopefully we're going to be live, I don't know, maybe in another month. We've got about 2,000 signups, so we're pretty excited when we do go live. Hopefully most of those people will come back and fill out a profile. Weblance is just a freelance marketplace similar to Odesk or Elance, but we're providing serious project management tools that are for the specific purpose of building web apps, mobile apps, websites. And we expect to see folks that just need a couple pages of code written as well. So pretty excited about that.
Fantastic. So we'll be dealing with some outsourcing stuff as well, and be getting into that a little bit more in detail with Jeff later on in the podcast today. And last but definitely not least, Matthew, maybe Matt, you can explain a little bit about what AppClover has been up to and what we're doing.
Yeah, sure. We're pretty new to the industry, but I mean it's a new industry, right? And we've got a website that's dedicated to really showcasing a lot of kind of what Carter was talking about earlier, a lot of information and knowledge around marketing and monetization of apps. And matter of fact, just to let everyone know, both Jeff and Carter are regular contributors on our site. So we're really showcasing as many experts in the industry and giving as much tips and knowledge and all that stuff just to help app developers and appreneurs really take their game to the next level. So we're building a community there. That's kind of our centerpiece. And we also just released our first issue of Appreneur magazine that's available on iTunes now for your iPad. So that was another big milestone for us, which we're pretty excited about. We're working on our second issue right now, and Carter actually is going to be a regular contributor there too. So he's not going to be able to get away from us. And so we're excited to see the release of that second issue as well.
I didn't realize you guys had released already. If I search, what do I search on iTunes to get that?
If you just type in, you can just Google Appreneur magazine and it'll show.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, and obviously we're really good at getting the word out there to all of our friends and stuff about the magazine.
Jeff, it's 32 pages of jam-packed information that you just really can't get anywhere else. So it's really being received well.
And in the first issue too, just to keep the plug going a little bit. No, in the first issue too, there's a bunch of free reports and stuff, 3 different free reports and stuff, just to kind of give you an idea of what the future issues are going to give to you. So in terms of content and stuff. So and again, that second one we're looking at next week. We should be finished with that. So we'll be submitting that second issue pretty soon. So we're excited about that. And then probably the last thing that I'll just discuss, and we've got lots of irons in the fire, but the last thing is we're actually building a platform. We're calling it AppZine Machine, and that's a platform for other people to create their own magazine apps for the Apple's newsstand and submit it, build it through our platform and submit it. So we're probably about 45 to 60 days out of being live on that, and we've got about 15 beta testers in the funnel right now. So we're really, really excited about that, and we've got a lot of our energy and stuff focused on that. So I think that pretty much sums up what we're doing. And if I left anything out, Len, you want to touch on?
Are you guys opening your beta up to anybody, or is it pretty much a private beta right now? Or
it's a private beta right now. We've had absolutely no problems filling those beta testing positions. So we will probably be taking another few beta testers on within the next couple of weeks just to test the final, and then the product release, of course, and then everybody will be able to test it.
Yeah, and actually too, like we have a waiting list started, and if people go to appzinemachine.com, they can sign up and get on the waiting list so that they get notified as soon as anything happens. And we're seeing that every day. A few people this morning signed up, so we're just keeping those people up to date on what's going on, and as soon as it's released, they'll be the first ones to know.
Yeah, fantastic. We're doing a lot of different stuff that is really, it's groundbreaking, unique, and we're trying to be able to deliver the most up-to-date content, the freshest content, that have more strategy and more insider tips with it than just, like I say all the time, do social media. Well, what does that entail? So this podcast is one of those ways that we're going to be able to open up a lot of those insider tips and strategies to the people out there, the appreneurs and the developers that are creating these apps, to be able to broaden their horizons of what information to be able to drill down and to be able to learn so that their apps can get the eyeballs needed. And it's a perfect segue, really. Let's enter into our first segment with Carter, and we want to spend just a few minutes. Yeah, we want to spend just a few minutes with Carter and drill down a little bit into what he's doing and how our other people that are watching this podcast can actually copy and emulate what Carter's already learning. So let's just dive right into that right away. And Carter, how many apps do you have in the App Store right now, and what are your projections for the next 6 months or so regarding releasing of new apps?
Yeah, so live in the store right now is pretty much, I would say, somewhere in the order of, we got about 18 or 19 that are live right now, and I've got, you can see behind me the list right here. There's about 35 that are going to be that are kind of being developed and monetized and everything right now. So it's all going to kind of, in the next 3 months, there'll probably be up to about 50, which is pretty exciting.
Are those mostly games, or are they games and utility apps and together, or explain a little bit more about what that's made up of?
Yeah, it's pretty much all games at this point. I've got a few kind of like niche market photography apps that I'm working on. A few other I'm going to do a test on like an emoticon app to see what that sort of market's like. I've got a few things like that, but it's pretty much all games at this point, yeah.
Right on. Well, and maybe just explain your strategy a little bit, because you don't really develop these apps right from the starting developing stages, do you?
No, it's pretty much, I guess the best term that's been coined is like flipping apps. And a lot of people say it's reskinning or redeveloping, but what I'll do is I'll basically go buy a gaming engine, or I'll buy like an instance of a piece of the source code, take it back, kind of look at it however I want to look at it, and then I will hire a developer and say, okay, this is exactly what I want you to do with this code, here's what I want you to install, and then I'll take care of a lot of the marketing side of things, and all of a sudden I got a brand new app that's at a fraction of the cost and gets a lot of the upside of the business model, so it works out very, very well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Wow. That's awesome. And scalability on that and the leverage on that is awesome. So.
Well, and there's very few people doing that out there. Most everybody that I've been in conjunction with talking, and they're developing their idea into an app, where you've sort of bypassed that and leveraged the ability that there are source code. They're already existing out there. you're basically just, as you mentioned, reskinning, putting a new look on them, putting a new slant a little bit, and then really focusing on the marketing side and the monetization side of it.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll talk about this in the magazine and in upcoming podcasts and all these sort of things. But what I could explain is like, you're basically buying a business model. You can look at their history, and you can look at what they did that made them successful, and very easily say, okay, well, I know that I'm buying a winning model here. All I got to do is put the right flavor on it, put it under my umbrella, and the chances of that being a success are like 75, 80%. Whereas if you have a great idea and you still need to build the whole business model, that's a pretty big gamble to take. And so it's a great way to kind of mitigate your own risk and at the same time have scalability, high profitability. You don't need a lot of overhead. It's a really cool model.
Well, and building a network as well with it is huge. I mean, we all know that building an app network to be able to cross promote and so forth within is huge. And so you're able to really bypass a lot of the time that it takes to be able to get these apps up and running. And in doing so, as Matt said, you're able to leverage a huge amount of numbers of apps as well, so that you can actually start cross promoting within your own network. Yeah,
exactly. And there's a lot of really cool, kind of leverage things you can do. I don't know how to describe it, but I kind of look at it as like strategic thinkers, specifically appreneurs, entrepreneurs, people that think are kind of visionary, don't like to work serially. They don't want to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Okay, now I'm published. They want to say, how can I do 9 things at once? And what's nice about this model is you can say, okay, well, I can send 10 icon jobs to my icon guy. I can send 20 screenshot jobs to my screenshot guy. I have my developers working on 10 sets of code, and it all happens in the amount of time that an ordinary business model would have taken to do. And if you had done each of those step by step, it takes each a couple of years. You can get this done in a couple of weeks. It's like a completely new way to look at things.
That's brilliant, man. Pat on the back for that, because it's definitely ingenuity at its best. I love it. So monetization-wise, what do you see as your go-to ninja tactic right now for being able to create more revenue from it? What's working like gangbusters right now, and what's not?
Yeah, so what I see in the market right now is definitely kind of a shift towards the freemium model. So giving away an app for free and then making money on the users and the downloads, specifically through ads. So what I've been doing is I've spent the last 3 or 4 months kind of auditing all the ad networks out there, specifically Chartboost, RevMob, Playhaven, iAds, AdMob, all Flurry, Tapjoy. And what I've been using is I've kind of settled on RevMob. They've done a really good job. They have really great customer service. They're growing like crazy. What I really like is they got really, really smart developers who started the company, whereas all these other companies are people that used to work in advertising companies, just kind of branched out and started their own. So they're all going out.
That makes such a difference.
Yeah, it's like they're advertising. They're going out trying to grow their company by getting more advertisers, whereas RevMob's coming in being like, I want to go out and get more developers. I want to grow my base and push the market up that way. And because of that, you can get much higher revenue, you get much better code, you get much more better customer service for the developers, and it's paid off. It's definitely the best monetization I've found so far for all my apps.
So to go expand just a little. Sorry about that, Jeff, but just to expand a little bit more, you mentioned on the freemium model versus the paid models. What's your opinion right now of both? Just to dig in a little bit deeper, the pros and cons. Any suggestions that you would make for people out there trying to make that decision of going either freemium model or paid?
Mm-hmm. The number one suggestion is to do both, because I shouldn't say that. I should say you should test both. And the reason I say you should test both is because what works for some apps doesn't work for other apps. It depends on a lot of different factors, your design, your pitch, everything. I've seen paid apps do really, really well, and they can be very sustainable because they have that going for them. At the same time, I've seen free apps that just crush it and make a ton of money, and just like they go nuts. If you have a paid app, you got to have something that's very unique. You got to have a really great value proposition, and you got to have something that creates a long-term kind of revenue stream, and because of that, that can make it really powerful. With free apps, you got to have killer marketing. You got to have a lot of downloads, and you got to be able to convert people who are going to look at your app for 30 seconds and delete it. And you got to find a way to make money on them in that 30 seconds. So it's just like a different business model. There's definitely pros and cons to each. I'm on the freemium model side of things. That's where I'm at, just because that's just working for me. But yeah, going back to what I said, the number one thing you can do is test your app with both models, in the course of 6 months, and see what works for you.
Yeah, exactly. And it really comes down to the what I call it is the distraction model, and how good you are at whatever your device, whatever your app is, at distracting those people for that amount of time. The amount of time that you can actually, quote unquote, tie up their focus or their attention on what your app is doing, the better it is to be able to create revenue with that, because you've got their attention for longer, of course. So I mean, that's something to be able to think about when you're creating your game or functionality app or whatever you're doing, your utility app, is to be able to create something that actually captures that person's attention for longer periods of time, which allows you to be able to gain access to creating more revenue streams from that user as well. Well, so what's the number one marketing tactic that you've done with your app marketing that's yielded you the most results over anything else? So if you had to pick one thing, what would it be?
If I had to pick one thing, and like I said, this is for my experience, investing in the publishing. And when I say investing, it can be money, but it can also be time and energy. The publishing is the icon, the name of your app, the description, the screenshots, what categories to put it in, and what keywords to choose for your app. The reason I say that is the biggest marketing tactic I've done is because it's the one I've tested the most. It's the one I've seen the biggest swings in. For Alpha Combat, my first big app, I went out and I launched it. It did what it did, and I'm sure in the future we'll talk through that case study at some point. But basically, I went out and did all the reviews, and nothing really happened. Then I did some promotions, and a few things happened, and I've done a lot of different tests. Definitely the biggest, you'll look at it and you'll see a noticeable change is if you design really awesome icons, invest time in your screenshots, and research the keywords and the competitive area you're in, and work on almost like an inbound marketing strategy, kind of like SEO for the App Store. That's definitely been the biggest game changer for me.
I just want to ask one question. Everybody says just get it out there, test it, make sure that you've got a business first. And I've always been inclined to design the heck out of everything, make sure it's perfect. How do you? At what point do you invest in that publishing and get all of that stuff? Do you test first to make sure that it's a viable app, or do you just go for it?
Well, the short answer is that I usually find someone. I just do market research first, I guess. So that's how I determine if it's going to be a good business model or not. And I'll kind of be able to extrapolate, kind of reverse engineer it. So I say, okay, this is the market I see. Here are apps that are doing what I'm doing. Research the hell out of them. What have they done? Is this worth my time? And kind of when you get to the 20, 30, 40 app mark in the store, you can start to see a little bit of the standard deviation of
you probably already know, right?
Yeah, it's you know what's going to work, but you also know well, if I just put it in, I'm going to get 25, 30 downloads a day on a game. But if I put in the publishing and the time and the effort, it's probably going to be around 100 and 200. You just start to kind of see those. To answer your question, I think that the amount of time that I invest, I look at a week of time as a huge investment of time right now. Whereas other people might say, oh my gosh, I would definitely invest a week to make sure that I have great publishing, as opposed to if you spent 3 months of your life going out and social networking and all that sort of stuff, that's hard to give an ROI on as much.
Yeah.
And also I wanted to mention too, market research is not actually just asking your next door neighbor or your friend or your spouse, do you like my game? it goes way beyond that. Maybe you can just touch really, quickly on some of the methods that you do, to be able to find out that market, view. Carter, what are a few things that you do to be able to test that market out?
Well, in real quick, Carter, just to jump in, because one of the things you talked about earlier as well is before you even purchase, an app or code or engine or whatever you're going to do to build off of, that's part of your buying a business model. So I think that actually takes care of the first step, right? I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what's a little different about what I do versus someone who has an idea and they want to go out and say is this a good idea? And so it's a little bit different, but Len, to answer your question, I think what the things I do, there's a few things. The first is that I look at the charts every morning. So I look at my sales data and all that stuff, but then I sit down and I look at the top 100 in every category. And I spend about half an hour doing that, and I look and I see who's new, who just got in there, like what they did, and that helps me see where the market's going for every category. So that's kind of the first thing, and you start to see trends very, very quickly when you look at who's in the top 100. You start to be able to predict that pretty well. Mm-hmm. The second is that you can do a lot of keyword research now. The first being with Google's old school keyword tool, which is what you use for Google AdWords. That's free, available to anyone who has a Google account. And that just shows you web traffic volume on keywords, and that just shows you the overall demand for the market. Second part of that is when you go to you can do keyword research. So you can go use a service like AppCodes, which is this great SEO tool for the App Store. But you can also just sit down on iTunes and type in fighter jet game or whatever, and see how many results come up and see what what lands where. So that takes care of a majority of it. It's hard to put an exact science on it because a lot of it is just having experience in it.
Yeah. Well,
every app's different too, right? I mean, every app is different unto itself, so it's going to take a different strategy for research for each one. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
So, if you had to pick the top 3 things app developers should always include in their apps, to help with their marketing and to help them actually move forward, what would some of those be and why?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the first thing you want to probably put in there is, especially nowadays, is the social networking implementation. Mm-hmm. Facebook, Twitter, especially with iOS 6 coming out, that's fully integrated into Facebook. So you want to keep that in mind moving forward because, people want to be, if they like your app, they're going to want to share it. And that is, if they can't share it, then you're kind of just, you're tripping over your own feet at that point.
Yeah, the ability to go viral, yeah.
Yeah. Second, what I would always include is, the ability to make monetization or, make money at the end of the day. And even if you're not going to use it. So, sometimes with, if I have a paid app, I'll install RevMob or Chartboost or one of these, SDKs, but I'll put the campaign on pause and I'll release it as a paid app so that if I ever want to change it to a free app, I can control the display on a server side. So I can just press play on my dashboard on my website and this ad starts getting served up so that I can control that. And from a marketing standpoint, it's just a great way to get your data, to make money on your app, to just kind of keep the process going. And I would definitely recommend that, for anyone, even if you're planning on doing it, 6 months down the road. And the third, I think, would be, this is going to sound, it's a little ambiguous, and this is more for the alpha combat type apps, like the big project type apps. You've got an idea, you build an app, sink a few $1,000s into it, and you have one big app, is to really make sure you have marketing materials. And what I mean by marketing materials is have the splash screen be a layered PSD file so that you can make banners for it. Or if you want to reach out to a blogger, you can give them assets that they want. Having the ability to create assets that you can share with people in a customized way, as opposed to slicing up screenshots for people, is an awesome way to make your app really unique, really special, without a whole lot of extra cost to it. And that's something you can work with a designer when you first build it out.
Mm-hmm. Presentation is so important.
You know, at that point, like you actually did a really good blog post on how to do those custom screenshots so that they look like they're in the phone and all that stuff. And that was on your blog. I think that was your last blog post, and that was a really good tutorial on that. So
yeah. So you know, what parting advice? Like if you know, we have people that are watching and listening to this and going to be in the future here, who are wanting to be able to, get started and get driven in the right way. Maybe they've created their first app or couple of apps. Maybe they've stalled. Now, what parting advice would you give to the newbie entrepreneur who's just getting started or one who's just started to roll?
The best advice I would give to someone is to, if it's, in a perfect world, the advice I give is learn how to read the code that developers are going to send you. You don't have to be able to write it. Like, I can't write code, but if they send you something, you need to be able to, like, press play in the simulator on Xcode and be able to, like, test it yourself and look at it and, put it on your phone and be able to, like, do it without them hand-holding it for you. And be able, because what that's going to do is you're going to be able to go back to them and say, look, I want you to include this, and here's where you're going to do it, like in the app. And it's going to give you a really, really great perspective on how to develop these things very quickly and very efficiently. And to that point, even if it's not coding, learn how to do something in the process that you can control and you can own, that you don't have to outsource, and that you can have some, input on. I would say the one thing I would recommend against is sitting back, not knowing anything, not wanting to know anything, and letting a team of 20 guys just kind of hand you what they do and say, hey, good luck,
Yeah, that's not. I just want to say with your code, you don't have to read code, but they should know what tidy code looks like, because if they're getting sloppy code, that is the biggest red flag you can have. I mean, your app may actually not work, and you'll have that final payment delivered. So, know what on the first time you look at their code, if it's not tidy. And there's plenty of examples out there. I think I even have a blog article on that. But there's plenty of examples on the net. Google it. Look at good, clean code, and if you're not getting it, red flag.
Well, and real quick, Jeff, to that point, this is a conversation we talked about last week a little bit, and one of the services that you're going to offer on Weblance is actually have people, if you want to speak to that about, like, basically help out with this. So if you want to talk to that.
Right. So if you're getting code on Weblance, and say it's the first milestone and it's not going to be a live app yet, it's just going to be raw code, you're really not going to know whether that code's quality or not. It could be tidy, it could be illogic. So one of the things we have is that you can hire a tester at an hourly rate, $10 an hour. Have somebody who can read code look at it, and if it looks good to them or if they have any questions, at least you can follow up with your developer. Couple of things. Number one, you're catching bad code. Second thing, the developer knows after the first submittal that you're paying attention, and they're going to put the extra effort in because it's being monitored. So that's a cool feature that we've added in our marketplace, and I'll add that the other marketplaces don't do that. So, yep, thank you for that.
It's so much like taking your car to a mechanic and absolutely having no idea what the mechanic is doing. You may pull into a shop that they're looking at creating some extra money through the ignorance that you just don't know what you don't know. So it's great information is try to find out and learn as much as possible, not just about the marketing, but even about the coding, so that at least from a project management point of view what's going on, and you can actually manage it properly. That's some great information, guys.
And I think real quick on the end, I think it's also important to know that, like, it can save you a lot of money too. I mean, I looking back in the last 5 or 6 months, I spent like $800 or $900 on developers like installing RevMob for me, and I look at that now and I'm like, you got to be kidding me! I mean, it's literally 3 lines of code into my Xcode project, and I was paying guys a ton of money to do this, and now it's like the idea of doing that, I'm like, you got to be like, what was I doing? But beyond, like, it is very important for the project management, but it's also like there's a lot of things that everyone out there can do themselves. Like the software and the programs is not, like, a lot of the heavy lifting can get done by developers, but a lot of these SDKs are not as difficult as everyone thinks they are. And you spend a couple of weeks learning it, you're going to save yourself a lot of money.
Right on. Well, that's some great tight information. And we're going to expand on it more and more as these podcasts go, and through AppClover.com, or through even your site at Blue Cloud Solutions, Carter, and yours, Jeff, at Weblance. So let's sort of move along, and Matt, let's go to you here a little bit and get a 30,000-foot view of the app landscape. What are you seeing? How it started. How it's changing. What it currently looks like, that type of stuff. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, this is a subject. It's fascinating, right? Anyone that's involved right now in app creation, development, or just paying attention to what's going on. It's just absolutely fascinating to see how quickly it's moving. We always laugh because we have this phrase. We always say it's moving like a juggernaut freight train, because it is, man. It's like, and there's just no way to stop it, and it's offering bigger opportunities, than the internet, than the boom of the internet, right? I mean, that's the reality when you're looking at the numbers now. As far as the days of, and I can't remember, someone said this and it made me laugh, and it's one of these things I repeat all the time, is like, throwing a crappy app up on Monday and shopping for your Ferrari on Friday. Those days aren't necessarily going on anymore. I mean, I'm sure there's some cases here and there, and people get attracted by the sexy deals like the Draw Something or like any of those big ones, Instagram, like, and yeah, those are big deals, but those are the home run deals that there's so much more to those stories, and there's so much time and effort and money dumped into the back end of those stories that you don't hear about. So I think it's important to, number one, talk about what's actually going on out there. So it's not you're not looking at the sugar-coated view of it. And then number two is to really examine the opportunity. Because, I mean, the reality is it still is a big opportunity. I wrote recently about this. It was in our first issue of the magazine, as well as something that I recently went through, was I starting to get involved in the app market and starting to really look and see what was going out there. Len and I did a gross amount of research, just a gross amount, and so I got to see it in person of what's really going on globally on a recent trip. I went to Africa, and while I was there, one of the things I was, in the back of my head, it was just kind of seeded. I went there on a totally different, unrelated trip. Had nothing to do with the app market or anything. It was a client I used to work for. They built a school, so it was the opening of the school there. So it was a really cool trip, right? It was big and powerful on a lot of levels. But one of the things that stood out was the fact that everyone is on a mobile phone there, and this is a third world country, and this has allowed people to change their lives dramatically in better their lives in so many ways because of apps. And I mean, so you look at the fact that not only are app developers changing, the world. I mean, literally, they're changing the lifestyles of a lot of people and the betterment of a lot of people. But also the opportunity for us as developers and stuff is a lot bigger than I think we're wrapping our head around, because we don't necessarily have that abundance mentality.
Yeah, so, Matt, I gotta add to that. You brought up a good point about how it's changing the world. I spent a lot of times in the Philippines, also a third world country. I've seen hospitals where there's 3 women to a bed. They've just given birth. They've got no money for formula, nothing, and every single one of them are nursing and are on their cell phone texting. And it is amazing to me that they don't have formula to feed their newborn baby, but they have enough load in their phone to send out text messages.
Yeah, and it is incredible. I mean, that's one of the things that, as happens with every single technology, as it progresses, it gets cheaper and smaller and easier to create and everything. So the cell phones aren't, if you look at India 10, 15 years ago, they were, $400 for the entry-level cell phone. But at the same time, or mobile phone at the same time, if you look at like Bangladesh, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think that surpassed the yearly salaries or the yearly income. So there's no way of doing it now. They're disposable for the most part, right? And you're looking at and I'll bring it back to Africa. Like the thing that that I really look at is one of the examples is mobile banking, right? Having an app on your phone where you can do mobile banking, and you no longer need to leave your job and walk, days and days and days to go to the bank and deposit your money. Where in transit you can be robbed, you can be because it is a poor country still, right? There's still things like that happening here and there. But now you're not away from your family. You're able to produce more. You're able to make more money. You're able to live a simpler lifestyle. It's little things like that. But I don't want to get too far off track because I can talk for hours on this. But I think if anyone wants to spend a couple minutes looking at number one, like Carter, for instance, from you've been involved, now for quite a few months, what it looked like prior to getting involved, or what your thought of it was versus where you see it now, and more importantly, where you think it's heading. Like, in your opinion, where do you think things are going? What's the next big thing on the horizon, or whatever?
Yeah.
So we can talk to that for a couple minutes.
Well, I will say, so I'll give you a kind of a unique perspective on this in terms of the App Store in general. The app market is growing like crazy. Yeah, the amount of people contacting me is through the roof. But what I see, which is very interesting, is what Apple is doing to change the app market in the App Store. And what I mean by that is the approval process, the strictness of getting an app into the store, the kind of apps that they are, essentially getting rid of in the App Store, and what's going to happen over, a year ago, you can put in almost anything that wasn't, NC17 rated, and if it had some semblance of a functionality, it would be in the App Store and it would probably get some downloads. Now it's I get more apps rejected than I do approved, because it's they're this isn't providing a good enough experience. We require that you have to have a restore button in your in-app purchases, and there's unloading all these new restrictions, which is, I understand it. It's just I think that in the next 6 months, it's not going to be as easy to get an app in the store as it was, and that's that's a barrier that has never really been there before. It's never been a question of, can I get in the store? It's always been is this a good idea? And now I think it's going to be are they even going to let this in? And that's something that's definitely needs to be on the radar for some people.
And you don't know until after you develop the app, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I think though, the reality of that is we're going to see a better user experiences, from the apps that you're downloading, and it's going to improve the market. It's going to elevate the market, right?
Yeah, it absolutely will. I think it's going to be if you know what you're doing and you've done your research and you developed a good app, it's going to be an awesome business to be in. And cool. I think that understanding this stuff and understanding how it works and reading a lot of information and knowing what you're getting yourself into, awesome situation to be in.
Cool.
But the guys who are just oh yeah, I'm just going to whip up something and let it rip, get real.
I'm going to make another fart app.
Yeah. Well, and it goes from what hobby to business. So you go from instead of just putting an app together and throwing it on just to see what it does, it entails more of a business mind and entrepreneurial mind behind it, where you actually need to do some strategy planning, and even strategy planning to the point of doing the marketing planning before you actually create and launch your app. You have to know is the market. You touched already on marketing and market analysis. You need to know this information. So I think as Matt was saying at the start, sort of the days are leaving where you don't need to know knowledge. I still say right now you can still be very sloppy and successful, but it's getting less and less, where as the competition grows in this App Store, you're going to find, I think, it's my prediction, you're going to find that you need to know your marketing better, you need to be more of a serious person in business, and you need to take it more seriously rather than a hobby, so that you do learn along the way. And it's going to get tighter and tighter. I mean, the competition is definitely going to bring with it a lot of new opportunities for learning for people. That's for sure.
And I think the other part of that too, which is kind of cool, is we're seeing it, and this is a little unrelated, but it's still about the industry as a whole. Is we're seeing how small our world's getting. Right. I mean, you look at on this call right now, we've got 3 countries covered. Carter and I are in the U.S. in various states in the U.S. Len's in Canada, and Jeff, you're in the Philippines, right?
That's right.
So I mean, look at it's just all these things, and besides the fact that technology is getting smaller, or I mean cheaper and more accessible for people and everything, and how connected and interconnected our world's getting, it's going to invite a lot of new developers and a lot of new talent to the market, and the ability to not just work for other people, but the ability to get involved and to actually be, I don't want to say competition, but you know what I mean, like to be a peer, whereas before you would have been. So I think that's opening up a whole new, like, thinking about what's happening on the horizon, where we're heading. I think that's going to become a huge factor, which is another reason why it's great and why it's important to get involved now, and to really take it seriously now, because it's just like, fast forward, from the start of the internet to now, you can put a website up and no one's going to know it exists. I always use that analogy, like if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it actually make a sound? Well, it's kind of the same thing with websites. Now, if you build one, who cares? Like, you have to do all the work, and you have to really know what you're doing to get it noticed. Same thing is going to happen with the apps, and it's happening. It's going to happen exponentially faster as we move forward in time. So you really are going to have to know what you're doing, and so get involved now is my point. Like,
and I think Matt, what Carter was saying before about social integration, I think that's going to have a lot to play with in the next while as well. Is how much can you integrate your app, into a social integration with Facebook or with other social media, so that it can be shared and you can actually take advantage of those things that are still out there now that can actually spread virally. Because people they share their interests, they share their likes. So if you can get some sort of app that's very captivating for people's attention, it works very well with social media. But again, you have to learn how to do that. It's not just like what I said before, do social media.
Yeah.
All of these things have to be learned talents that that you continually. It's a learning curve. But as you go, test, tweak, repeat. Test, tweak, repeat. And you can actually gain a lot that way.
And to that point, I mean, this is one of the things we're providing by this Appcast, by our site, by both Carter and Jeff's sites, is mentorship, right? Like, learn from other people, learn what the successful people are doing out there, and emulate it, and like, seek out that knowledge, because it's going to make you that much more successful, that much more quicker. That's not grammatically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think that's another thing that, a little, I guess, a segue piece of advice, like, that's what you need to know, and you need to know what's going on out there too. So I want to shift gears slightly just to kind of keep things moving along, and because, again, how quick this industry is and everything, it's important to know what's going on and what's topical and, what's happening today. So one of the things we're going to do in these podcasts is we're, in each one we're going to bring to you kind of like a handful of headlines of things that are happening that week, and just to kind of let people know, and just kind of do a little news segment. So with that, I'll let Jeff, I'll let you take over and kind of tag in here.
Yeah, and it's kind of good because we've been talking a lot about viral marketing, and there's a new piece of legislation right now in the House that could seriously limit our users to leverage, viral marketing. We have a bill in Congress called the Commercial Felony Streaming Act, and it makes unauthorized web streaming of copyrighted content. And it doesn't matter if it's music, sound, or a video, some kid playing a shoot-up video that he uploads to the internet, that if you are to upload that you could go to jail for 5 years in prison. So here's basically what can happen. You're filming your kid, and they're dancing in front of the TV, or you've got a barbecue in the backyard and there's music playing, or, like I said, kids playing, he did a great headshot and he wanted to upload the video to the internet. All eligible to put you in jail for 5 years. So for, as appreneurs, that's a big thing, because if you're putting apps out that are games or any other kind of thing, YouTube right now is one of the hottest ways for viral marketing. So that's something that we want to pay attention to. Right now, there's 43 organizations that are lobbying for this. There's only 3 that are against. Demand Progress is probably the best one. There is a link on weblance.com for it. They have a lot more information about it, so it's just something to keep an eye out.
I'll be curious to see how this plays out, because it's one of those things where on at every instance or at every opportunity, whatever, there's always a flip side, right? Like this seems like it's a bad thing, and it is going to make it a little more difficult. Like, for app developers like Carter, one of your apps, like you're more than happy if people want to do a review and do a screencast review of it and put it up on YouTube, and like you don't want anything to happen. Like that's helping your cause, right? You look at how many sites are dedicated to Angry Birds. Do you think they care? No, they encourage it. Right? And so while it'll present some more hurdles and stuff, I think if this goes through, granted, I mean obviously it's looking like this is where it's heading, but I'll be curious to see how it plays out. Number one is how they're going to enforce it, who's going to enforce it, what kind of effort's going to be put against it. And number two is, will this actually improve communications or whatever, or relationships between app developers and their fans? Because people will have to get permission in order to do this. And while it's a pain, because you think about the Angry Birds guy, 200 people a day want to post a video. That's a lot of emails to say yes to. If they're all asking for permission and stuff. So I mean, it's really curious to see what's going to happen. It's something
this is about the sixth piece of legislation that's been reformatted, and it's probably the most watered down one, because fortunately the other ones did fail. But I think that railing against this regulation of the internet's important for appreneurs, because it can, I think, snowball if we let them start doing that. But all right, so the next story that we have here. There's some new developer policy rules for the Google Play, and this has come as a result of probably 25 press releases that were done, that were released by sort of small blogs over the internet, but had these huge marketing campaigns. I smell Apple about sort of malware and piracy and all this kind of stuff. So Google had to respond to it. They did update their privacy rules. Keep an eye on that. Go have a look at it. It could affect your next app. And let's see here. Facebook has opened up their App Center to the world finally. So go check that out. Learn about how it works, what's possible, what you can do there. Maybe there's some integration opportunities with your mobile app, and you could be, first off the starting line. So.
Yeah, and I would jump in there, Jeff, and say that you're right on with the idea that just checking out communities like that, checking out marketplaces like that. That's some of the best places that I have gotten ideas for building games. And not only that, you'd be amazed, especially using a service like WebLance or any of these, where you could go to a developer and show them a link to a Facebook app or a Facebook game and be like, hey, what's it going to take to build something just like this? And they can look at that and give you a very clear price and cut out 3 weeks worth of, well, what happens on this screen, what happens on this screen type of stuff. And, those type of idea engines are awesome for, appreneurs and what we're doing, all that stuff. So that's definitely a really good resource to check out.
Right. And the final story is Doom has been released for the Windows device. Now, this is not a huge story, but it did occur to me, because we are going to interview Carter today, that these devices are becoming more powerful, and we're able to put sort of these big box games into our phones. Are those games going to steal market share from what essentially right now is small business appreneurs? Carter, do you see that as possibly a threat?
I don't know. I think that it's. I understand what you're saying. I think it's a little bit of apples and oranges in certain ways.
Because they're different types of games, really.
Yeah, and it's just like there's so much brand loyalty to the platforms and the devices and things like that it's. I don't see a whole lot of like switchover in terms of I think you might get people who might play it on both, but I don't know if you're going to someone who's going to say I was going to play it here, but now I'm playing it here.
Yeah.
It might be more of an and less of an or.
Because Doom on an iPhone, let's face it sucks. It's not like playing it on your TV. Yeah. So. All right, that's it.
All right. Well, real quick, as kind of a last thing to do here, just because of who we have on this Appcast is. Jeff, obviously, and we've talked about what the service that your site is going to serve, for the marketplace as far as finding outsourcers and outsourcers, a place for outsourcers to get work and projects and stuff like that. And Carter, with your experience of working with outsourcers, I wonder if we could spend just a few minutes talking about outsourcing. And I've got a few questions to run past you guys just to get your thought. And we'll just kind of try to do this quickly, and we can always expand upon it on future Appcasts if it makes sense to do so. And this is one of those bottomless pits of a subject we can talk about it forever. But
and we're running long too. So.
Yeah, we're running long. So let me just go ahead and dive right in. And number one, this is the question you'll hear time and time again, and I'm sure you guys do, and Jeff, you might be a little biased with your answer on this one, but
I'll be completely biased, I promise.
Where do you find good developers? And to that, to take that a little step further, is what are the basic vetting questions? Like, give us a couple of questions you ask at the very onset of before you engage a developer.
Yeah, I've definitely hired both good and bad developers, and even today I still occasionally will hire a bad developer, and I think that, to be honest with you, it's almost impossible not to do it on occasion, but the idea is that you need to recognize it like super early, like within the first week, and that's totally possible to do. I would not. There's a lot of payment schemes out there where, we pay a third up front, a third in the middle. Don't do that. Get some sample code from them. Put them on a micro project and examine the micro project. I can tell you in my own experience that when I have made a bad hire, or anybody that I know has made a bad hire, it was at a moment of laziness that the questions that should have been asked were not asked. And it was really down to being prepared, having questions written down so that when that call comes to you, and you're in the kitchen, you got to run to your computer, sit down at Skype, and ask this person questions. That you make sure that you ask everybody the same questions, and that you don't miss one, because every single question is really important. And number one, make sure that you have an example of their work, something that is at least as complicated as you want to accomplish. If they cannot provide it to you, or they give you a sample of work from their company, or they give you a sample, of something they did 2 years ago, forget it. It has to be recent. It has to be the actual developer that's going to be working on your site, and it has to be, at least as complicated as something that you want to build. And I would say that's probably the most important thing that you can do when you hire a developer. I don't know, Carter may have a different view, but for me, that's been the golden rule. So,
I would definitely say that seeing what they've done is huge, and knowing that it's them who are the ones who are doing it. Because a lot of times when it comes to outsourcing, it's like, oh, this is our work, like, yeah, okay, whatever, dude. I've seen that before. One thing I would throw in there, two things real quick, would be one, whenever I put up a job on Odesk or Elance or anything, I always put at the end of the job request, make sure you type in this sentence at the beginning of your response so I know you read this.
Yes.
And all these guys, I'll get half of them will just give me a templated thing, and then half of them will write exactly what I asked them to write. And so right there, I've narrowed down 50% of the people. So that's probably one quick tip that I would say. And the second is that I always ask pretty specific and complicated questions in my job request. And I say, like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. Love to hear your thoughts. Here's the project, and explain the whole thing. And if they don't come back to me with either asking me more questions or with a very good answer to that question and wanting to continue the conversation on Skype or GChat or whatever, that conversation's like, that's it. Like, I'm not interested in working with them. So those are two things that I definitely do.
It's those canned emails where, yes, we have very good developers, we help you well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it's one of those things. Like, I've hired numerous of outsourcers as well, and that was one of the things that I later on adopted was, even if it's just our email response, like, make your subject line this or whatever, just that one little, and that's the first thing. And then the second thing for me is to, instead of having, and this kind of goes to what you were talking about, Jeff, as far as structuring the payments and stuff, is make a really, really simple milestone be the first part of the project and release funds done. Like create, like for apps, like create a screen with 3 buttons that look like this. They don't need to have any functionality yet. I just want to see that they work, do a screencast of it, and let me check it out, and then I'll give you instructions on the second half or what the next step is for. Like, just build in stops so that if they're not the right person, if they can't deliver that in an hour or a day or whatever, cut them loose, move on. You have to be quick to make that decision, otherwise you're just you're basically hurting yourself. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to answer my own question.
Well, it's all about following directions with the outsourced, right? You're trying to be able to get to a point as quickly as possible to see how well they can actually not only do the work but follow your directions, because that's where a lot of the breakdown is in the
communication.
The communication.
And that leads to the second question too, actually, pretty well. The other part of that though is you have to know how well of a project manager you are. If you're a piss poor project manager, don't put that on yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's huge. Or figure out a system. Do a little bit of studying. Figure out what the agile project management system is, or what some other ways to actually learn project management, and then systemize it for yourself before you basically bring anyone else into your chaotic
So
work.
here's where the biased part comes in that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
We've built a project management system into our freelance marketplace so that the providers have to behave in a certain way. They have to deploy those best practices. So you're going to get those updates. Those tasks are going to get done according to a certain time schedule. And you know what? Their payments sort of in the fund. And if they don't meet those goals, if they're not delivering what they promised to deliver, they very well may not get paid. So we've developed that project management tool so that when clients come, they don't have the project management skills. And I'm not a particularly great project manager, but having this tool there will fill in those gaps and really make sure that the project gets delivered. So there's your biased answer that you were talking about.
And I did not know that was something you had built into your platform, so I did not see that at all. And we had a conversation about that this morning about project management and learning. Like, actually, Len and I that's one of the things we were chatting about this morning, or one tiny part of it. And that's one of my biggest issues is I have a hard time letting go and micromanaging. And we've had a few really good outsourcers lately in a few different areas, and that's helping me trust better. And I think that's the biggest thing is you have to let go and you have to trust the people that you're putting in charge. Again, measure it, manage it, but get to the point where I'd imagine, Carty, you probably have people you work with on a regular basis. Like, build that team up of people you trust.
Well, it's all about delegating too, because as a business owner, which is what we've been talking about, moving from hobby to business in the app world, as a business owner, delegation is always very, very important to be able to learn how to do better, because you cannot wear all hats in your business.
Yeah.
So, real quick, another question I wanted to dive into is, again, you traditionally, when you think of outsourcers, you think of areas like Philippines, India, Eastern Bloc, or you think of these traditional areas, and along with that comes some confusion on your part, like, okay, what am I going to do about the language barrier, the communication issues, or the cultural differences? And those are considerations, across the board. What do you think? How do you get over, I guess, that hurdle? I don't know if either one of you want to take this first, but for instance, and this is actually something, Jeff, you shared, so I'm quoting you on this, is like Southeast Asia, it's really hard to get bad news from developers. So obviously it makes it really difficult to know when your project's running off track or getting off the track. So how do you or any of the challenges they're facing or whatever how do you deal with things like that?
Well, there's a really great study I read, and I should have had that. Maybe I'll bring it on the next podcast, or I'll post it on my blog. But it really put things together for me. And what they did was that they measured the power divide. So in sort of South Asian cultures, there's a very large power divide between sort of the boss, the worker, the parent, the child, the policeman, and the citizen. And there's a belief there that to say no to somebody who is in a position of power is extremely rude. It doesn't matter whether no is the truth or not. You just don't say it. And so, it's this power divide that sort of gets in the way of communication. Now, being an American and not being aware of this power divide and not understanding that these people are not giving me the news I need to know so that I can make the business decisions to change the course of the project, or do a workaround or make some sort of decision. My team's just not giving me the information I need, and I just don't know what's going on. And they may be having a difficult time. And so that you can see very quickly. I mean, if you've got a big project going, even a small project going, that power divide is going to be a real problem. So you have to know how to sort of cut through that and make it safe for them to tell you the truth and do those things. And my technique in the beginning was to get utterly frustrated, and then of course they lock up, they don't want to talk to me, they get more nervous, and before you know it, it's just, I got to fire him and I got to go hire somebody else. It would have been a lot better if I understood it from the get-go, sort of cultivated that communication and dealt with it in a better way. And so that's what I've learned. And I'll tell you what, I've been dealing with Southeast Asia for 15 years, and I read this article 3 years ago, and it completely changed the way that I dealt with Southeast Asia, and it has made such a difference. But it was really about understanding that power divide.
So Jeff, do you mind if I put you on the spot real quick?
Go ahead.
What about creating a really good article for our next issue of Appreneur Magazine? Can I get you to commit to that right now?
I can do that. Yeah. Yeah. No problem.
I'll throw in a few quick experiences I had about working with guys in different countries. The first is that this is going to sound a little strange, but if you start to notice how they talk, like how specific people talk from different countries, they have various, like they might use words in different ways, and after a while you start to realize what those words, what they think that means.
What they really mean.
Yeah, and like it's all the same thing that we're doing. It's just that they learn English a different way. I find that if I talk back to them in the same way that they're talking to me, things go a lot smoother. Yeah. And so like I kind of let them kind of set the bar for how much English we're going to do, and work within those confines. And that can be hit or miss, but I find that it goes a lot smoother when I can talk kind of in their vernacular a little bit.
Hey, Len,
so let's hear your best Indian accent.
Oh my gosh! I think we'll get into like legal battles if I start doing that.
We'll keep this as socially sensible.
Yeah, we're gonna keep this very.
Oh, come on, guys!
Yeah, very top level.
Well, cool, man. I think I have one last question. I know we're going way over than what we planned to, but I'll leave it on this, and then we'll just kind of close it off. Is the old adage, you get what you pay for. In as far as developing, do you find it to be true?
Oh my God, Carter, this is my philosophy, and please tell me if you don't agree with this, because I'm not completely sure it's true. But what I think is that we hire folks. Say we're hiring them out of India, and we hire them for $10 an hour, and we get some code back. I have found that the quality of that code at $10 an hour is roughly the same as if I were to pay some college kid in the United States $10 an hour to do that code. And in India, if you get sort of a developer with, say, a 7 years experience, they're going to charge you $30 an hour. Whereas in America, you could hire a developer that has, say, 3 to 4 years experience, and they're going to charge you $30 an hour. So and the quality that the code I get from both is about the same, but my communication with the American is a lot easier. So I don't know that the economies of scale are genuine, but here's the deal. There are not a lot of developers in the United States for less than $40 an hour, and they're very hard to find. And even now in our sort of recession or whatever we call this that we're in, it's still very hard to find developers in the United States. So I don't know that obviously there is going to be somewhat of a cheaper price for offshore workers, but I don't know that it's as big as everybody thinks it is. You're not hiring like the Indian version of a $40 an hour developer. You're hiring a $10 an hour developer, and that wage will hold true around the world. So I don't know, Carter, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's in my experience, it's really hard to say you get what you pay for, because I've had guys that'll give me amazing stuff for super cheap, and I've had guys give me horrible stuff for a lot of money.
That's also true.
What I will say is that I have kind of like a mental graph in my head about what this ratio looks like, but it's like, if you expect to outsource creativity or problem solving at a low price, you're going to get bad results. That's kind of that's what I think. And then if you have very executional work, where it's very black and white, literal, like no question about it, that you can point to and say this is a yes or no answer, and there's very clear deliverables, you have a much better chance of being outsourced that at a low rate and be able to expect to get, it should, unless you have to. And if you do, you want to pay a lot of money for it. That's kind of that's kind of what I do.
Yeah. Well, that actually is a really good time to be able to segue off and close things up, because that's a really valuable piece of information, and it also allows us to be able to come back in our next podcast and be able to expand on some of these topics as well. And so for everybody watching, and I hope that you've really enjoyed this first podcast from AppClover.com.
Episode 1.
Yeah.
And episode 1, yeah. And we want your feedback and different content that you want covered. Let us know. We're always open to suggestions, and we hope that you can look past our first endeavors in this. And you see, as for an example, I don't have any kind of AppClover. My name's not below me or anything else. Those little glitches are going to happen. We outsourced that, actually. And
if we only paid $5 an hour for it.
Yeah, it needed more creativity on that one for sure. But we appreciate everybody watching, and please share this with everybody you know as well. Help us spread the word. Check out AppClover.com and AppreneurMagazine.com for more information. Both of those will be having the latest and most up-to-date, freshest information on marketing and monetization in the app world, as well as please also check out weblance.com.
Sign up for beta.
Yes, if you sign up for the beta, there's a special offer for the AppClover community. So if you sign up for beta on weblance.com, you're going to get premium membership free. It's roughly a $240 savings. So again, go to weblance.com, sign up for the beta, and you're going to get some awesome savings right away there. So that's for sure. I suggest you go to weblance.com and also check out what Carter Thomas is doing at bluecloudsolutions.com. That's bluecloudsolutions.com. And follow him. He's actually his blog is incredible. Has some great information. Yeah, it really has some awesome information. And we're also going to be having both Jeff and Carter on Appreneur Magazine and on AppClover as well, being able to share more secrets and insider tips with us and find out what's really going on. The building, marketing, and monetization. So, Matt, did you have anything to add at the end?
No, I just want to comment a couple things. First of all, Jeff wins the Awesome Mic Award.
Oh, yeah. Hell yeah. Check that out.
That thing's amazing. And then also, Len, I love the whole floating head thing you've got going on, too.
Yeah, I know. It's, I'll try to figure it out, but it is. And when I put the black on this morning, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good, I'll look like this orb head, floating.
Awesome. You have to really concentrate on your face. So
it's like the crystal ball technique,
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, and honestly, one of the cool things about kicking off this first one with you, Carter, is you've got a great following on your site, and we know a lot of people that know you as well, and we're looking forward to number one, you adding into the magazine as well as being on this. So really, really looking forward to seeing what the feedback is on this and stuff. I wanted to thank you for being on it, and obviously look forward to future ones that you want to be on as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been awesome.
Definitely. In our second podcast also, we'll have another guest as well, that will be able to shed some more light on this app culture that we are all in. And so for now, that pretty well does it. But like I said, definitely check back on all the sites I mentioned, and you'll be able to see these podcasts ongoing in a series from AppClover.com. So Until then, we bid everyone a farewell, and definitely check back continually, regularly. Thank you for watching.
Thanks, guys.